welcome to More to the Story. My name is Michelle Ankerberg, and I'm here with my cousin Jeff Palanch. And today we have the privilege of interviewing my parents, John and Darlene Ankerberg. And we're going to find out a little bit about how they got into the ministry and about how the Lord has led them together over the years.
So Auntie Dar, I want to start with you on this one.
All right.
You guys have done so many different debates with all different kinds of characters and personalities and scholars. I'd love to hear some of what you remember as the most memorable moments in debates.
Well, probably the one where I was involved, okay? And I'm not supposed to be involved. Really. So, okay, I remember, I won't mention who it was, but Walter Martin was the guest. And, okay, they were just destroying this other group. I mean, totally. So they took a break, and they were going at it so much, and John just let them keep going. Well, the opposing side, they were attacking John. I mean, they didn't know where to go, so they were blaming John for this and this and this. Well, I happened to be in the back of the room, and it just kind of came out. I'm like,
well, wait, I'm just kind of, calmly asking the questions, and things are going great, and Walter's cutting down their arguments.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, from the back of this room, I hear this woman's voice just very loudly say,
"That's not right. That's not true. John didn't say that."
And I thought, who is that woman? And I turned around, it was Darlene. Honey, you can't do that.
They edited me out,
Yeah.
but
That's a shame.
So, it was really a shame.
That's to say she's into the debates.
Do you have any Uncle John that stand out to you?
Well, I love some of the debates that the guests on both sides are very knowledgeable, and they're going at it hammer and tong, And what I always am concerned about is not that we're just having a debate, but that I want the audience at home to understand the terms of what's going on. So I usually define terms when I hear terms coming up and say, what you mean by that is, and then keep on going, so that the people would stay tuned in terms of what we're talking about, because they've never heard some of this stuff. It's all around our country. I'll just tell you one. We used to be able to do all kinds of religions that we can't do anymore. We're losing freedom of speech. And I had a debate with the top Muslim scholar in America and the top scholar in Canada. And I had two Christians on the other side. And we did it at the Peabody Hotel in Florida in the great big ballroom. And it was packed, and about 90% of the crowd were Muslims. Now, I found it very interesting that every time we took a break, it was like, we had to take a break almost every 15 minutes, that about half the crowd got up, went out into the hallway, put their prayer rugs down, and started praying toward Mecca. When the break was up, they'd roll them up, come on back in, and do that. All right, so we were cruising along pretty good. Now, I had bodyguards at this one. And
Which was before 9/11, before it was really out there.
Well,
really.
this was before 9/11, and so I thought this is an interesting topic, Islam, and we need to find out. Are there two Islams? We hear about this, we hear about that. Are there two? I thought there was just one. There's one Quran, so let's get to the bottom of this. And as we were talking, one of my Christian guests made a comment about Muhammad's family, and all of a sudden, the whole audience stood up, and they were going to rush the platform.
And there were almost 2,000 people there.
Yeah, and I thought, so I shouted the whole place down. I said, whoa, stop, stop, stop. We'll get to the bottom of this. Please calm down. Everybody sit down. And so they came and they sat down. And I was so glad I had bodyguards around me. And they did. The Lord helped us, and they did. And I said, let's take that a little slower, and let's start with you, and then we'll go to you. And we kept on with the debate, and I also like the fact that I got to end that debate. 1.5 billion Muslims in the world say that Jesus did not die on the cross. You got Roman scholars, you've got Jewish scholars, you've got Greek scholars, you've got Christian scholars, you've got the church fathers, you've got modern scholars that don't believe a thing in the Bible. They all agree on one fact, and that is that Jesus Christ, certainly, if there's any fact that is certain in history, it's that Jesus Christ died on that cross. All right? So I try to get that into every program, because then you have to say, well, why was the tomb empty? And why did these disciples, why did they go from despair into changing the Roman Empire in 300 years so it became Christian? Okay? During the time of Domitian, they were dipping Christians in tar and then lighting them on fire and using them for torches for their parties. They were crucifying mothers and putting their babies around their neck while they crucified them. They were taking Christians, slitting their throat or torturing them in other ways. They took some Christian leaders like Antipas, and they just put them into a brazen oven made out of bull that was their symbol, and they heat that thing up and they cooked them inside of that thing. And so the book of Revelation was written to Christians that were suffering like that. And, you know, we've had a lot of contentious debates, but, you know, I always think nobody has killed me, nobody has killed my family. Now, there have been times when we've had SWAT at our house, a SWAT team, for 2 weeks at a time. There have been times when we've had SWAT here at our office where our staff had to go home different directions and at different times. And we were watched by the police. And so, you know, sometimes it's got a little hairy, but the fact is, you also got to realize we go all across the world. And so some of these things are really hot topics all the way around the world. But God's taking care of us.
Yeah, I remember one of the guests that John had on, and I can mention her name. She's passed away. It was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And I remember when John studies, and he can talk about this, and I mean, he reads everything these people have written. He listens to debates they have done. I mean, the research that goes into this. I remember somebody called in and said, you know, John does this half-hour program every week. What does he do the rest of the week? I'm like, okay, seriously, you know, because a lot of work goes into that, and that's how you get a good program. That's how you get a good debate. But I remember we were taking her back to the airport, and she says, you know that John, he's a sneak. And I said, oh, really? Why? She said, well, he said he read everything I've ever written and listened to everything, but she said, I didn't think he did. But he did. And so, you know, they get it. They understand that, you know, he knows what he's talking about, and he can destroy because the truth will always win out. But, you know, you've got to be on top of it. You got to know what these people are going to say, because they'll lie right to you.
Right.
He's had guests that will say, well, I never said that. And John says, well, here it is in the book, and he pulls it out. This is page number, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's what you said.
I used to expect them to lie, so that's why I read their books and I underlined the portions I thought they would lie, and I had them ready. Sometimes I had it on the paper. And so they would say it, and I would just say, but this is what you said in your book. Now, for some of our Christian guests that are trying to present the evidence for, like, in science and stuff like that, you know, they usually do interviews, and unfortunately, many of the secular and Christian interviewers today, they have never even read the book. All they do is they get the book, they hold it up, and they look at it, they have no idea what's in the book. We just did a program with one of the smartest scientists in the world, and he had 528 big pages. I showed you that book. Well, I underlined almost every sentence in that book about 2 or 3 times and circled some of the words just to try to figure out what he was saying all along the line. And you have to do that to be prepared for these people.
One time Hugh Ross has been on our program, and he's coming back in a few weeks to tape. And the first time he came on, John sent him 100 pages of notes. Poor Hugh, I think he about fainted. I'm not sure he wanted to come do the program. We
and that's what all
him,
the guests have said. You know that how much preparation that you put into it and reading their stuff, and they have said that nobody's ever read my books, which I don't understand that. But anyways, but you know, if you're going to have someone on, you would think you would go through and study that. But
You know, it's interesting too, and maybe it's because of all the work, but we started out as the apologetic program on television.
What is apologetics?
Huh?
What is apologetics?
Defense of the faith.
Right, you defend the faith. Be ready to give an answer to
that a trick
everyone
question?
that asks you a question of the reasons for the hope that's within you.
I know.
Yes.
And that's what we do.
But nobody else has picked up on that or done a program. Now, some guys are on
Right.
radio, they'll do that, but we're still the only ones after 40 some years that are doing this type of program, which I find
right.
interesting.
It's a
So-
different format now, but I miss the debate format that you
Yeah.
used
So
to
do I.
do. Yeah.
The reason we don't do the debates is because we've lost freedom of speech in this country.
Right.
Even in our own country, there are certain topics. For example, when the abortion debate came out, when we first started, Ronald Reagan came to our convention. It was like him talking as a pastor to all of the NRB leaders, which were the national religious broadcasters, about 1,500 leaders. And he said, this is going to the Supreme Court. I think we're going to win, but the fact is I need you to support us. And there was 10 of us that got back in the back room and we said, we agree, but unfortunately we couldn't agree who was going to lead that little session, so we did nothing. And so recently I just asked the leaders in Washington, I said, you know, if our president, current president, he just writes a little edict by himself, doesn't check with the Congress, doesn't check with the Senate, and just simply says, you know, it's going to be a hate crime for anybody to say that Jesus is the only way. I said, I want to know what our guys are going to do. Because right now, Jesus' ethics are under attack. It's like they don't even think about that. So you got the abortion question, you got the transgender question, you've got all of these questions that are on the board. Now, we're going to get into that, but it's not only thinking about America. Canada probably is tougher. In different parts of the world, you can't even talk about the place. For example, there's one country, one of the biggest countries in this country, where 80% of the people are of one religion. I can't talk about that religion. I can't tell why Christianity differs with that religion. Why? Because they would kick us right off of the TV. So I hate the fact that we're losing the freedom of speech, and that includes the debates. The debates would fire up people in this country so much. Take any one of those topics, abortion, homosexuality, transgenderism, you know, go into the different Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, all of those things. We've got the evidence. People have never heard it. But we're tied by the circumstances right now.
Thanks for joining us. If you'd like to watch full programs of The John Ankerberg Show and learn how you can partner with us in bringing the gospel around the world, just click on the link nearby.